ఓహో, అందుకని చంపుతారు కానిస్టేబుల్ గాని.
Maharaj, you are muted. Maharaj, you are muted.
Okay, can you hear now? Okay. Should we start, Sujoyji? Should we start?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay. You can hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So someone else's mic is on, I think. Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine Jananim Sharadam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagatgurum Padapadme Tvayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur. I think, Singhaji, I think you're muted. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Okay. So let's start. So today we're gonna have a nice class. Today we're gonna go through the remaining sutras, chapter 2, 49 through 55. And then secondly, I really think it's relevant. I've sent you. How many of you were able to get a copy of it? Swami Prabodhanandaji's article, A God-Centered Life. Okay. Okay, so we're going to discuss that today. Okay, and I think that that's like really relevant. I'm actually looking forward to discussing that. And for those of you who did not have a chance to look at it, please pull it up. It's on the PDF that Sujoyji sent by WhatsApp as well as by email. Okay, so let's now finish up sutras 49 through 55. And now we're going to talk about pranayama, the different types, what pranayama is. Tasmin sati swasa praswasya yoho kati vichedaha pranayamaha. Okay, so tasmin, in this sati existing. So what is actually pranayama? Can anybody tell me? What do we normally think of regarding pranayama? We talked about this in Raja Yoga. Go ahead, Shomnathji.
Maharaj, control of the prana through control of the breath.
Yes, control of the prana through control of the breath. Because prana is something much more than breath, right? We talked about that before. Prana is what actually governs this entire universe. And the elements it governs it through are these three different elements, sattva, tamas, and rajas, according to the Sankhya philosophy. So prana is something actually much deeper. It's that cosmic vitality which animates the entire universe. But for us, pranayama, yama means what? Control, prana. So we talk about breath. So we're talking about this in meditation, right? This swasa praswasa yoho. So inhalation and exhalation. So this actually has tremendous value, not only in meditation, but even in practical life. And we'll discuss that next. This is just a picture of Swami Asaktanandaji. How many anyone here has met him? He was the principal and the headmaster of Narendrapur. Sangamitra has met. Okay, good.
I had seen it.
You've seen him. Okay. So one of the first times, he actually used to be an assistant in Hollywood. And then he came back to India. And he was really known for his work in Narendrapur. He's very highly regarded monk. And I remember that when I had first joined in 2004, I was like just, some event was taking place in Narendrapur. And he was telling me a little bit about pranayama. Later on, I just happened to go by his room. And I saw him like in a deep state. He was doing pranayama, and then what you call this pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, then dhyana. So you could really feel that. When I was walking by his room and I was just watching him, I just peeped into his room, and it was something amazing to see. I still remember that, even almost 20 years later, that depth of meditation. Anyways, why I'm bringing that up is when I was observing his breathing, it was naturally rhythmical. You understand? It's just naturally coming in and going out. Naturally rhythmical. This was Swami Asaktanandaji. Let's go to the next sloka. Bahya abhyantaraha stambhaha vritti deshakala sankhyabihi paridrishto dirgha sukshmaha. So now it's talking about how should we engage in this pranayama, okay, in a simple level. So Swamiji says its modifications are either bahya, external, abhyantaraha, internal, stamba, means stationary, fixed, regulated by time, place, this desha, kala, sankhya, bihi, and number, either long or short. Now, I just want to just do just a brief demonstration, and I want everyone to also do it with me, because I think that a little practice here is very powerful. So I want everyone just to um, just real just for a brief moment, take a deep breath. Okay. Now, this we'll just try something called anulam vilom, and I want everyone just to try it, just as an experiment. So take the thumb, put it on the right nostril, and breathe in four units. Now take the pinky and the ring and the ring finger. Keep both nostrils closed, and now breathe out. Again, breathe in. One up. Hold. So when one breathes in and breathes out, you can, if you did it a little bit, if you practice this a little bit, you can see it on the internet. It's taught by Ramdev Baba. He gives practical instructions. But you can just see, even just doing this a couple of times, it changes your breathing. And once your breathing changes, what does that change? That changes the rhythm of your mind. Your breathing is connected to your mind. And suddenly, we were able to calm down, and we can get a better control of our thoughts. So this type of thing we can do not only in meditation, but we can try to make it a practice even when we're outside. Now, one other thing I wanted to talk about prana. You know, we talk about prana, and what we're talking about is prana actually helps us catch. Yeah, you have a, okay, go ahead. Someone has a question?
Swamiji, namaste. I have a question.
Yes.
The one problem I face during performing Anulom Vilom is one of my nostrils stay congested, or less air flows from it. Lesser air flows from it than the other. So I cannot do it. I cannot perform it properly. So what should I do?
Okay. Could that be due to a deviated septum, or what's
Yeah,
the cause
yeah,
of that?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So that's okay still, because the main thing is that what I'm trying to emphasize, this just helps us, even the practice itself. Did you just do it? Did you try it right now?
Yeah, I tried, and I sometimes do it too. But
Eh,
the
eh,
septum really
okay.
bothers me.
So then, if the septum bothers you, then one thing, I think Simha, I think your mic is off. On. Okay. One thing that you can do then is just, you could just breathe in, hold it, and breathe out. You don't have to do anulam bilom, right? Any type of control of breath. So you could
All
just,
right.
there's different ways of put. I think Singha, I think your mic is on. If you don't, sorry. So I think that any type of pranayama, there's different methodologies, and Swamiji even talks about this. He doesn't talk about anulam bilom. He just talks about breathing in and then breathing out. You understand? The
I
main thing
see.
is that when we do this and we sit down, I guarantee it's like almost like, we lots of people want to take tranquilizers, but this is a natural tranquilizer.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that only thing that we have to do is, when we're talking about these different practices, they seem so simple, but the main thing is, that awareness should come into our mind, especially when our kleshas are triggered, when we get excited, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this is the main challenge we're going to talk about today. That how to it's easier to do these things when we're sitting in our room by ourselves, but the main challenge actually is when we're out in the workforce, when we're engaged in an argument, whatever. How do we bring this awareness? This is what we need to think about. How to bring this awareness. Okay, let me step back. And let me just focus on my breath. Before I give a response, before I give a reaction. Okay, so this is 2.50, and this is similar to Anulam Bilom. So I would
Thank you,
suggest,
Swamiji. Thank you.
you're welcome. Thank you for the question. It's a very good question. So I would like to just request everybody to try and practice this. Try and practice this when waking up in the morning time. Just 3 times, this what we talked about. Any type of breathing, this Anulam Bilom, just breathing in and out. Just practicing 3 times when waking up in the morning. Okay? And 3 times in the evening, and 3 times during the noontime. If you can try to do that, that's the request that if possible. So we need to put these things into practice. Okay? Let's go to the next one now. Let's just see what Swamiji says. The 3 sorts of motion of pranayama are one by which we draw the breath in, another by which we throw it out, and the third action is when the breath is held in the lungs or stopped from entering the lungs. These again are varied by time and place. By place is meant that the prana is held to some particular part of the body. By time is meant how long the prana should be confined to a certain place. And so we are told how many seconds to keep one motion and how many seconds to keep another. The result of this pranayama is udghata, awakening of the kundalini. Now I just want to add one other point. If you practice this very seriously, it requires a teacher. That's one thing. If you want to go, we're just talking about simple exercises, like 3-5 times. But anything more than that, if you want to do it, it's a very systematic thing, and you should engage a teacher, a good yoga teacher. Let's go to the next one now. 2.51. Bahya abhyantaraha vishya akshepi chaturthaha. The fourth is restraining the prana by reflecting on external or internal object. This is the fourth sort of pranayama, in which the kumbhaka is brought about by long practice attended with reflection, which is absent in the other 3. So this bahya. Bahya means what? External. Abhyantaraha, internal. Vishaya, is objects. External objects or internal objects. Akshepi. This comes from the dhatu kship, which means to throw out. Transcending. Chaturthaha. So this kumbhaka, you may recall that a disciple of Ramakrishna, his name was Choto Noren, younger Noren in the gospel. He lives in Shampukur, and he did not become a monk. He later married and became a lawyer. But Ramakrishna said at a young age, he used to enter into this kumbhaka. And actually there, the breath almost stops. Now I'm going to ask a question. Swamiji says the kumbhaka is brought about by long practice attended with reflection. Who can tell me what type of reflection? What are we reflecting upon?
Heartbeat.
No, not the heartbeat. This reflection is again, when Swamiji talks about this akshepi, transcending. That means we're leaving this this breathing altogether. So that means we're trying transcendence. The word he uses is transcendence. So transcendence, what have we talked about again and again in the yoga philosophy? What is the ultimate goal of yoga? Who can tell me? What is the ultimate goal in our yoga philosophy?
Chitta vritti nirodh.
Chitta vritti nirodh, but for what purpose?
To identity with the Purush.
Yes, identity with Purush, yes. So
The
what
transcend nature, basically.
So if that's the case, what are we reflecting upon then? Our Purusha. Yes, our Purusha nature. And that reflection comes when the mind becomes calm and still. The vrittis are no longer engaging with the external world, and not only the external world, the internal world. We talked about that before. When the mind becomes calm towards the external objects as well as the internal objects, then what do we see? We see that reflection of the Purusha. And that's what we're reflecting upon.
Swamiji, I joined late. I didn't
Yeah.
know the beginning what you said. So can you please tell again what is Purusha?
Yes, this in the Sankhya philosophy, have you in yoga in Advaita Vedanta we talk about this this Atman, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So what is the nature of the Atman? What do we normally say in Vedanta?
It has consciousness.
Conscious,
Chetana.
Sat Chit Ananda, right?
Satchidanand. Yeah.
So, and then in Advaita Vedanta, this Atman is the only thing, right? Advaita Dvitiyam. This Advaita Atman alone is real. Everything else is unreal.
Yeah.
Yet, in the Sankhya Yoga philosophy, we have two eternal entities. One is what? Purusha.
Purush and
And
Prakriti.
what's the other?
Prakriti.
Yeah, Prakriti. In Advaita Vedanta, we use this word Maya, right? And in
Yeah.
Advaita Vedanta, what are the two? What are the three powers of Maya? If you've read a little bit of this Vedanta Sara, it says this Vikshepa Shakti, right? This power to project, Avarana
Okay.
Shakti, this power to delude.
Okay.
But ultimately, Maya is unreal.
And what is the third?
This power to project, delude, and keep one in ignorance, agyana.
All right. All right. Agyana. All right.
Yes. So that's in Advaita Vedanta. But ultimately, what is it? What's the definition they say in Satasatvyam Anirvachaniyam? So it's neither real nor unreal. You can't say it's Shankara talks about it. You cannot say it's unreal, nor can you say it's real. You know, it's some
Yeah.
entity.
There's some truth in it.
Well, you can't say it's truth, but you can't say it's untruth either. There's something. Okay, there's something there.
Yeah.
Ultimately, they say in Vedanta, Anirvachaniyam. Anirvachaniyam mane, it's unexplainable.
Unexplainable.
But in yoga philosophy, Purusha and Prakriti, both are eternal entities. Purusha is our Satchidananda, and it's our real nature, and Prakriti is the manifestation. You can say it's inanimate. It's the evolutes, the Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. It's inanimate. It's Jara. Yet, when it comes into close contact with Purusha, it evolves. Okay? It
Yeah.
evolves in that. What does that evolution consist of? This entire visible and invisible universe.
Creation.
Creation, yes. Which includes what? Our own mind-body ego complex.
Hmm.
And now in yoga philosophy, what we have is that unlike Advaita Vedanta, there's only one Atman. But in yoga philosophy, they said there's infinite number of Purushas, not just one. Each one of us is a Purusha. So the goal in Advaita Vedanta is that you can say this joining of the Jivatman, realizing it's Paramatman. But the goal in yoga philosophy is that Purusha separating itself from Prakriti. So discarding Prakriti and realizing our real consciousness is Purusha. So this is the
Okay.
just
Lovely
in
explanation.
briefly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, good question. Thank you. So this is 51 right here. Now let's go to 52. Okay. Tataha kshiyate prakasha avarannam. From that, the covering to the light of the chitta is attenuated. So Swamiji says the chitta by its own nature, all knowledge, it is made of sattvic particles, but it is covered by rajas and tamas particles, and by pranayama this covering is removed. In Advaita Vedanta, what do we say? We talk about through this process of vichara, this process of discrimination, this veil of ajnana, of ignorance gets removed. And what Swamiji is saying here, giving his interpretation, that this entire Prakriti is ultimately made of these three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And Sattva is like transparent. It's still a bondage, but it's transparent. So it's Rajas and Tamas. They're the activity. Tamas is what? Tamas is darkness. And Rajas is what? It's the Chanchalmon. It's the mind that's moving up and down. It's the distracted mind. So these are what makes us unable to see our true Purusha self. So the idea is that through these different spiritual practices, whatever it may be, jnana, bhakti, dhyana, karma yoga, we get chitta shuddhi. And as we make our mind more and more pure, what happens then? Our mind becomes more and more sattvika, right? When the mind becomes more and more sattvika, what happens then? So sattvika is like it's like transparent. It's like you can say like I went. How many have any of you here visited Narmada, Omkareshwar? So if you ever go there, it's not like the Ganga water, the Ganga here in Kolkata. Here it's like very muddy sometimes, right? Especially during rainy season, and so many things are there. If you go to Narmada, you can see the pebbles below. It's so clear. I've never seen such clear water in my life. So that's like sattvika, the sattva water. So same thing with like our minds. When our minds are covered with mud, rainy water, we cannot see what's below. What is below? That's our Purusha nature. So to the sattvic mind, what happens? We can see the reflection of our own nature. So the goal of all these practices in yoga is what? To make the mind more and more sattvika. That's the first step. How do we do that? So Swamiji said by any of these yogas, karma yoga, serving God and others, doing it as an instrument. So by that my mind becomes pure. Bhakti yoga, that I surrender Sharanagata, I surrender everything to the Divine Mother, to Thakur, and I'm just an instrument. Again, what we're talking about, dhyana yoga, raja yoga, trying to control the mind, and see what's inside. And finally, this jnana yoga, this sat vichar, discriminating between the real and the unreal. So by any of these methods, we can realize this. But there is one important thing, and we'll talk about that. We'll get to the article. Let's go to the next one now. So after pranayama, what comes next? After we can somewhat control our breath, the mind becomes relatively still. Dharana su cha yogat yata manasaha. So the mind becomes fit for dharana. This yogyata means adhikari, capable of holding. The mind then becomes capable of holding to one spot. It's no longer chanchal. So again, I would ask everyone, try this yourself. Try through this pranayama, even in a small sense. If you practice this, definitely our mind will become more calm and we'll be able to hold our mind, hold our will to a certain object, and definitely our meditation will improve. Let's go 2.54. Swaswa vishayaha asamprayoge chitta swarupa anukara indriyanam pratyaharaha. So now he's giving the next element, pratyahara. Pratyahara is what? Drawing in of the organs is by their giving up their own objects and taking the form of the mind stuff as it were. Let's look at Swamiji's commentary. The organs are separate states of the mind stuff. I see a book. The form is not in the book, it is in the mind. Something is outside which calls that form up. The real form is in the chitta. The organs identify themselves with and take the form of whatever comes to them. If you can restrain the mind stuff from taking these forms, the mind will remain calm. This is called pratyahara. So this is there's actually a really this is really interesting in the yoga Vedantic philosophy, how we acquire knowledge. Normally when we think about acquiring knowledge according to Western science, what is the way? The object outside is real, right? And that enters through our it enters through our eyelid, enters into our nerve, it ultimately communicates it to the brain. But what they're saying in this Yoga Sankhya philosophy, no, the mind itself, it forms a vritti. That vritti goes out. It sees what's there. And seeing what's outside, it assumes that form. But it's all inside out, not outside in. So on one sense, you could say that this entire world is partly subjective. It's both subjective and objective. So this pratyahara. So this is once you so this pranayama, dharana, then pratyahara. Okay. Tataha parama vashaya tindriyanam. Thence arises supreme control of the organs. When the yogi has succeeded in preventing the organs from taking the forms of external objects and in making them remain one with the mind stuff, then comes perfect control of the organs. When the organs are perfectly under control, every muscle and nerve will be under control, because the organs are the centers of all the sensations and of all actions. These organs are divided into organs of work, karmendriyas, and organs of sensation. When the organs are controlled, the yogi can control all feeling and doing. The whole of the body comes under his control. Then alone can he begin to feel joy in being born. Then can one truthfully say, "Blessed am I that I was born." When that control of the organs is obtained, we see how wonderful this body really is. So that's actually what we're all striving for in the beginning, is to control this sense organs. And that's really relevant today. It's really relevant today because what we find more and more is that we're being controlled, especially by technology, especially by the internet, especially by, now they're talking about this AI, this chat GPT. If you can really look at it, slowly and gradually we're losing more and more in control of our willpower. And this is happening in a very subtle way. And many people are now talking about it. So the question now becomes that, what are we going to do about it? And that's why we have to rethink about yoga in the present age. And part of what I feel that yoga should be is how to strengthen the willpower, not to fall prey to this internet and these things. To use, Swami Prabodhanandaji, we're going to talk about an article that was written by him today. He used to talk about it, that technology is a good thing, but we should be the master. We should control technology and not be controlled by technology. So they say technology is a good tool, is a good servant, but a lousy master. So that's being done. Now what I would like to do is present this Swami Prabodhanandaji's article. And everyone, I request they can pull it up. Yes. Okay. I'm pulling it up here, but also if you can read it here too. This is actually a sneak preview. This is coming up in our June Prabuddha Bharata issue. It's by Swami Prabodhanandaji, who I had the good pleasure to be able to mix with for a long time. He was a senior monk of our order. He passed away in 2015. He was initiated by Swami Virajanandaji, who was a direct disciple of Swami Vivekananda. And he wrote this article, God-Centered Life. So I just want to go through it because I think it's very relevant. Yoga has a way of presenting various states of consciousness. So we're going to talk about different states of consciousness, which is what the Yoga Sutras are also talking about. The question is raised, where does a person live? In other words, on which level of consciousness does he or she dwell? In a psychological sense, we can understand this. Sri Ramakrishna said that once while visiting Kolkata, he noticed that most of the people's attentions was on their stomachs. That is, their whole personalities were centered on eating. When one is in that center of consciousness, one thinks of food no matter what the circumstances may be. Everything presents itself in terms of food only. So who here has experienced that? You know, I sometimes we all go through that through the day, right? When we're very hungry, food consciousness. We think of what am I going to eat today? What will I have for breakfast, lunch, dinner? In fact, you can say this is why in a monastery, especially in our Ramakrishna monasteries, we don't think about that. The food is kind of fixed. Every day we're kind of more or less having the same food. We're more or less having the same clothes. We're more or less having the same hair, which is almost no hair. Why is that? So that to try to minimize the possibility of our mind dwelling in those different states of consciousness. Stomach consciousness, always thinking about food, living in that particular state of consciousness. There are other levels, such as sex-centered, money-centered, and the like. Living in a particular center means that we come back to that center again and again. After doing some work, I return home. In a similar way, if one is food-centered, whatever one may be doing, eventually one returns to that center. That person is living at that level. So, can anyone tell me, like, actually animals, right? Dogs, cats, birds. Besides human, most of the animals, you can say they live predominantly at that center, food center. Survival. That person is living at that level. If your level is money-centered, then that is the main motive. For example, a business firm is primarily interested in making money, and in a way, it is serving people also. In India, there's an insurance company who says, let's see, I bear all the burdens. Whatever you have, I preserve. So we don't have time to go over the whole article, but does everybody understand that? Living at a certain level of consciousness, is that clear? Does anyone have any questions about that? In other words, where does our mind predominantly go? In a default mode. Prabhupada talks, once when a statistician's wife had to go on some errand, she asked her husband to take care of the children while she was away. When she returned, she found a note. He had calculated the number of times he wiped the tears, 5. The number of times he had to mediate when the children were quarreling, 10. The number of balloons he bought, 15. And at the end of the note, he wrote, how many more times will the father take care of the children? And that is 0. So his life was in terms of statistics. Wherever he goes or whatever he does is on this basis. A mathematician goes on scribbling figures here and there. So wherever one's center is, one's whole life is there. So Swami Bhajanji used to, in one of our vice presidents of our order, he used to say, what is our God? Can anyone tell me what is our true God? I've mentioned this before. What is really our God? It's what we give reality to. Right? It's where our mind, it's where our center of consciousness is. That's our true God. So what is the implication of this? If you are evicted from your home, then you feel uncomfortable. If our center is disturbed, then we feel off balance. So I first want to ask, I want this, does everybody understand this point, center of consciousness? Any questions or any point of discussion on this? So I want everyone just to take a moment. I want you all to think during the day, where is your center of consciousness? Again, it can fluctuate in the morning time, afternoon, evening, during the daytime. Just reflect upon that. Many times it might be on work, promotion, money, family. So, first thing is self-awareness. There's nothing good or bad, but the self-knowledge is very important. Having that knowledge, where does my center of consciousness, where does it go to? Does everybody understand that? Accurate self-awareness. I sometimes feel in our different schools, one of weakness is that we project too much the ideal without dealing with the real. The real is where I am right now, where my center of consciousness is right now. Next point is, what do we do when we get off balance? Maharaj raises this point. If our center is disturbed, then we feel off balance. Conflict is the result. The external world is always conspiring to evict me from my home. And the internal world too is conspiring to evict me from my own center of consciousness. If I am here, you say, why don't you go there? If I am there, why don't you come here? In that way, we are pushed from place to place. Say I'm living in my own world, and then a person whom I don't like enters my sphere. My center is immediately shifted where? To the other person, and I feel disturbed. How many of us do we face this every day? We're in like a certain mood, and somebody else comes into our space, and we get disturbed. When I get angry with someone, my center shifts to that person. Similarly, other compulsions may. The Bhagavatam says when you sit for meditation, you should think of God, not about someone whom you don't like, because normally our center is there. What is the center of gravity? In physics, it is that point of a body from which it is supported. It could be suspended and be in equilibrium. You cannot move anywhere. If it is in the center of gravity, it is in equilibrium. That is its center. Normally, a person feels at ease in his own sphere. For example, a business person. As long as the conversation centers on profit and money, he is happy. If a foreign idea is introduced, he feels upset. So the external as well as the internal world, both are trying to upset our center of gravity. The Vedanta Sarda asked, where is your center of gravity? Where is your Atman? The Atman is the center of gravity. It begins with the son or daughter. If anything happens to a son or a daughter, one feels that has happened to oneself. A center is where we can comfortably stay at a particular time. At first, our center is physical, the body and everything connected with it. Then it is psychological, the mind level. Psychologically, we go on changing because we have different interests that pull us from various sides. Even psychologists suggest that when there is a problem, one should shift the attention or shift the center. This is really important. This is what I want to get to. When our center of consciousness gets disturbed, when we become agitated, how do we become agitated? What does the Yoga Sutra say about that? What are the 3 types of vrittis that we've talked about that can agitate us? Raga, Dvesha, and what else?
Avinivesha.
What is the definition of these 3? What is raga?
Raga is recollecting something, trying to recollect. Trying to revive an idea, thought which was pleasant, of an experience that was pleasant.
No, actually, raga is this anger. You can
Anger.
this raga, anger, or this attraction, and this dvesha is what?
Repulsion.
Repulsion, and this abhinivesha,
Clinging to life.
clinging to, yes, fear, clinging to life. So these are the 3 different types of vrittis that upset our center of consciousness. So one thing is that when we lose our balance, main thing is how do we deal with things when we lose our balance. So I was just mentioning that one way is what this pranayama, taking deep breaths. Another way, if we're not in the habit of that, changing our thought. This is something that we can all do. That when we're feeling so upset about something, putting our mind on something else, even watching news, anything else. It doesn't have to be something spiritual even. Shifting the mind away from that, giving time. When we get agitated, what the Yoga Sutras tell us, it takes time to get back down, right? So what do we do at that time? If we react during that time when we're agitated, that can lead to more disastrous consequences, right? We always talk about that. And what happens when we react rather than respond? Remember, we talked about the samsara chakra. We create more and more karma. Every reaction deals with one more chain of link of karma being deposited in our chitta karmasya. So that gets deposited for our next life. So what we want to try to avoid to do is what? Avoid reacting. And rather than reacting, what? Responding.
Respond.
Yes, responding. And how do we respond? What did we talk about? The teachings of yoga and Holy Mother and Ramakrishna. What did they emphasize? This viveka, discrimination. Now, sometimes it's not easy to get that. We need a little time and space to get to that discrimination. So what he's talking about here, shifting the level of consciousness. So I just want to be practical. I know ideally we should say shift it to God, but that's not always possible. So when we're agitated, even rather than just stepping away from there, and even anything else, if it could be news, anything, just listening to music, anything that, you know what we want to do at that time? Where our normal level of consciousness is. If we like music, if we like watching news, something, anything just to get away from that thought. Is that clear? When one of these kleshas has been activated, don't try to deal with it at that time. Don't react. Don't even try to deal with it. Give time and shift the consciousness to some other thought. Now, what Maharaj is saying here is, that's the first stage, what I talked about. The second stage is keeping it at God-centered life. God-centered life means what? In the Gospel, Ramakrishna talked about this. What did he say about, can anyone tell me? About the compass, that one should keep the compass. The mind should be like a compass. You know, the compass is always pointing towards the northern direction. So similarly, our mind should always be pointing towards God. That's our goal. That's the goal of any of the yogas you talk about. Advaita, yoga, karma, bhakti, any of the goals, yogas, this is our ultimate goal, to keep the mind in a God-centered direction. In fact, someone said, what is the definition of purity of mind in a spiritual sense? The answer is that mind, when there's nothing to do, it naturally runs towards God. Okay. So normally when we're living in the world, we're living what Maharaj called an egocentric mind. So I'll just read them, go to the middle here. If we do not shift away from the ego, then we become egocentric. Of course, being egocentric, many so-called good things can be done. Good work and service may be done. But if the center is in the small self and anything happens, say to such a person's reputation, then he or she is shaken. Or if someone wants to build up a huge institution and make a name for himself, leave some mark behind, and he fails somewhere along the line, then disappointment is the result. Don't we see this in our own life, even when we try to do something noble, right? We're trying to do something noble, but what starts off as a noble undertaking, afterwards we feel very underappreciated. Oh, no one's appreciating me. No one's giving me credit. So this is what outwardly it seems like a divine-centric activity, but inwardly it's an egocentric activity. Is that clear? A certain amount of equilibrium may be there. The person may be very good-hearted, respectable, and not depend upon others for things. But if his or her center is in the ego, he is shaky. So a God-centered life is shifting even from individuality to the real self. That is Atman. You know how you can see this? If you see even these millionaires, these billionaires, anybody who's successful, if you poke them about their accomplishments, many times you'll see that they become, he or she, any of us become shaky then. We feel like we become very insecure, you know. Especially if you poke somebody about something that they think he or she thinks that they're good at. So you can see then the ego reacts. So no matter how many billions of dollars you have, or how many accomplishments, or how high you are in the tenured rank as a professor or Nobel Prize winner, if it's not God-centric, if it's egocentric, then we'll always be on shaky ground. So our goal has to be very clear: how to shift this from egocentric to divine-centric, God-centric. So it says, for that, a spiritual aspirant tries to keep his or her center in God through a sustained effort. Now, one thing we have to also keep in mind, this Bhagavatam says this, is that the mind could never be in a vacuum. We talked about this in Yoga Sutras. So the mind either will keep of something good or something bad, but it won't be in a vacuum. So for that reason, what Shankara talked about, we try to give the mind good thoughts. We just talked about this before, right? The more good thoughts we give to the mind, divine thoughts, what happens to the mind then? What did the Yoga Sutras say? I think it was 2.52. The mind becomes more sattvic, more transparent, more purified. Okay. Okay, it's interesting. I'll just finish one last thing I'll talk about. He talks about this: one should direct even negative emotions towards God, anger, lust, or jealousy. It is said that when we are angry with somebody, psychologically, we are situated in that person. So he gives the example in the Bhagavatam, this Kamsa, all of it, he was Krishna's uncle, and through his hate of Krishna, he realized Krishna. So whoever we think about intensely, if we can somehow divinize that. So even in Ramakrishna talked about this, and we also talked about this in this Yoga Sutras, these emotions that we have, somehow even anger, lust, greed, if we can somehow give it a Godward turn, somehow giving it a Godward direction. So whatever may be the emotion inside or the memory of the past, it is the ego who is the king of all these, who possesses everything. Try to bring your consciousness from the ego to the spirit or the self. A God-centered life is moving from an ego-centric life to a spirit-centered life. Okay. Okay, that's. I'd like to complete that today, and now we can. If anybody has any questions or points of discussion, I would recommend that all of you go read this article. Sujoyji sent it, and if you can't, try to read it. I think it's very helpful. But now we can just discuss it. If anyone has any questions or like to discuss anything, we can do that now. Okay. So, well, let me ask this then. Nobody has any questions. Where can anyone say, like, where is our level of consciousness? What is it during the day? Can anyone talk about that? Does anyone care to address that? So,
Maharaj, it keeps changing.
yeah. What was that?
It keeps changing.
Okay, be more specific. What do you mean?
So whatever that time is in mind, that is the center of consciousness.
Right, right,
And that keeps changing throughout the day.
right. So So what do we do then? How do we deal with that? It keeps changing. So what's our goal then?
Goal is to be alert and to keep it focused on, like as you said, that to as the article said, to be God centric,
Right,
to remain alert.
right. So how can we do so? All this that we've discussed. So let me, like you say, go ahead, Shomnathji.
Well, I mean, I think what we can try, like the Guruji, the gurus, they prescribe twice a day. We should sit for japa, and we can give a direction at that time to our
Well,
mind.
okay. So I was thinking about this. And not only that, I was thinking about when we talk about pranayama, all this prana. Actually, when this direction comes, it comes the day before sometimes. When we talk about the evening, the day before, that sometimes we give momentum to thoughts the next day. So one thing that we can try to do is, I was thinking about it, especially what did Swami Vivekananda emphasize? Especially for people living in the world. What did he emphasize more than anything else? This strength, right? So one should have that, not only divine consciousness, but there's also this strength as well. So the day before, evening time, thinking thoughts, good thoughts, thinking divine thoughts, and that if we do that the previous day, try this experiment during the night time, that sometimes carries over to the next day. So that gives like a positive impression. That gives a positive momentum to both our prana and our thoughts as well. When we have that positive momentum, then sometimes when things happen, unpleasant things happen during the day, that gives us a little bit of a buffer. That gives us a little bit of a buffer and more calmness of mind to deal with things. So,
And that viparit bhavna means like opposite thought of.
yes, opposite thoughts. Yes, yes.
Maharaj, I want to add that in it, something about mind dwell in past memories and future fear. That is also what we say cause of this center shift.
Absolutely. What Swamiji mentioned. This what causes us to dwell. It's both objective as well as subjective. So I think he said that both the objective world as well as the subjective world are both conspiring to throw us off our balance. So both are there. It's like a tag team.
It always shifts as it is constantly conspiring us to shift from present. It happen frequently. Every time we have to strive back to our present through self-awareness. Through practice, we can indulge that time in present. But most of the time, uh, it is like that. Our center is shift according to the conscious level you had said. But this
Right.
struggle is in every form. Is at every level. I feel.
Yes, that's true. That's true. So one thing that we can try to do also, we have to take sometimes like a sankalpa. We have to build our willpower as well. We have to. That's why this constant meditation, these things, something to build our willpower, and also to take some type of sankalpa that let me try to control my mind. Let me try. Why not? You know, because everything else I try to control, even if even if I achieve some control of it, it won't give me that ultimate goal. So let me try to take back my will. This is a really important thing, especially for young people. Especially for young people nowadays with this internet, these things, it's taking our minds away. So we have to try to take back our will and our willpower and our mind as well. I think that's important today. Okay. Okay, so I think today is Buddha Purnima, so I'm gonna then close off today. So, Shomnathji, anything?
Well, two things I wanted to share, like thoughts.
Yeah.
Like in the whole duration of the day, our mind goes through some well-defined, say A, B, C, D states. I mean, which are quite. I mean, strange things, but I mean, but every day it kind of sometime it'll go into this and occupy itself with something, and then be. I mean, like these are kind of. I mean, like in baseball, you have these bases, right? So it'll go through that
Yeah.
different 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I mean through the whole day, and which have nothing to do with the things that are happening outside or reality.
Right.
And other thing I find that mind keeps on spending a lot of time trying to analyze hypothetical situations which can happen and what we will do, and then what will be the outcome of that, and lot of energy goes into
Yes.
imagining
Yes.
and analyzing such situations.
Yes. So we talked. That's one type of vritti that we talked about. This vikalpa. If you remember in the first chapter of Yoga Sutras, we talked about vikalpa, and you're absolutely right. That uses a lot of our psychic energy. This imagination. What hypotheticals? It's it's both objective as well as subjective. And sometimes now what happens is that you might watch some news station. It might give you some news that this war might happen. So our mind is engaged in those hypotheticals. So if we can understand that, then at that time we have to somehow, first idea is accurate self-awareness, and then what's the next point? To take back the mind and put it towards something good, something positive. You know, even one thing you can do if you're not in the mood to read, you can watch the Mahabharata, Ramayana. You know, sometimes people say that they binge on the internet watching movies. Even then, if you want to do that, this Pratipaksha Bhavanam, then why not like watch the Mahabharata, something more holy that doesn't leave bad samskaras afterwards.
Yeah, thank you, Val.
But good point though. That's accurate self-awareness. See, the mind's hypothesizing about different events. A very good point. Okay, very good, Sudhirji. Okay. Okay, so I'll close now then. Close for time.
If there is no other question.
Okay. Are there any other?
Will
Go
you
ahead.
will you be available next week also?
I can be. Okay, sure.
Okay, then if there is class, I will request you to.
Okay.
Because Ramesh Maharaj is not available next week.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, I'll close with the chant then. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Okay, thank you. Good
Pranam
night.
Maharaj.
Good night.
Pranam Maharaj.
Namaste.